This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Thomas Hoover. The Canterbury Tales by Geoffrey Chaucer. Edited by D. Lang Purvis. This recording is based on the book The Canterbury Tales and Other Poems. The original text contains poems by Chaucer and a lot of notes and explanations by the editor. To view these, please click on the Gutenberg eText link on the LibriVox catalog page of the Canterbury Tales. The Canterbury Tales, the Prologue. When that Aprilus with his showers swoot the drought of March hath pierced to the root, and bathed every vein in such liquor, of which virtue engendered is the flower, when Zephyrus eke with his swoot breath inspired hath in every holt and heath, the tender crops and the youngest sun hath in the ram his half coursey run, and small fowls make melody, that sleepen all the night with open eye, so pricketh them nature in their courages. Then long a folk to go on pilgrimages, and palmers for to seek strange strands, to fern hollows couth in sundry lands. And specially from every shire's end of England to Canterbury they wend, the holy blissful martyr for to seek, that them hath holpen when that they were sick. Befell that in that season on a day in Southwark at the Tabard as I lay, ready to wenden on my pilgrimage to Canterbury with devout courage, at night was come into that hostelry well 29 in a company of sundry folk, by adventure y fall in fellowship, and pilgrims were they all, that toward Canterbury would ride. The chamber and the stables were wide, and well we were in eased at the best. And shortly, when the sun was to rest, so had I spoken with them every one, that I was of their fellowship anon, and made forward early for to rise, to take our way there as I you devise. But natheless, while I have time and space, ere that I farther in this tale pace, methinketh it accordant to reason to tell you all of the condition of each of them, so as it seemed to me, and which they weren, and of what degree, and eke in what array that they were in, and at a knight then will I first begin. A knight there was, and that a worthy man, that from the time that he first began to ridden out, he loved chivalry, truth and honour, freedom and courtesy. Full worthy was he in his lord's war, and thereto had he ridden, no man far as well in Christendom as in heathenness, and ever honoured for his worthiness at Alisander he was, when it was won. Full oftentime he had the board begun above all nations in Prussa. In Letoa had he raised, and in Russa no Christian man so oft of his degree. In Grenade at the siege eke had he be of Algesir, and ridden in Belle Marie. At Lays was he, and at Sadely when they were won, and in the great sea at many a noble army had he be. At mortal battles had he been 15, and foughten for our faith at Tramacene, and lists thrice, and aye slain his foe. This ilke worthy knight had been also some time with the Lord of Palatine against another heathen in Turkey, and evermore he had a sovereign price. And though he was worthy, he was wise, and of his port as meek as is a maid. He never yet no villainy ne said in all his life, unto no man or wight. He was a very perfect gentle knight. But for to tell you of his array, his horse was good, but yet he was not gay. Of fustian he weared a jippon, all besmottered with his habergeon, for he was late y-come from his voyage, and wente for to do his pilgrimage. With him there was his son, a young squire, a lover and a lusty bachelor, with locks curl as they were laid in press. Of 20 years of age he was, I guess. Of his stature he was of even length, and wonderly deliver, and great of strength. And he had been some time in Cheviche, in Flanders, in Artois, and Picardy, and borne him well, as of so little space, and hoped to standen in his lady's grace. Embroidered was he, as it were made all full of freshe flowers, white and red. Singing he was, or fluting all the day. He was as fresh as is the month of May. Short was his gown, with sleeves long and wide. Well could he sit on horse, and fair a ride. He coulde songs make, and well indite, joust, and eke dance, as well portray and write. So hot he loved, that by night or tale he slept no more than doth the nightingale. Courteous he was, lowly and serviceable, and carved before his father at the table. A yeoman had he, and servants no mo at that time, for him list ride so, and he was clad in coat and hood of green. A sheaf of peacock arrows bright and keen under his belt he bare full thriftily. Well could he dress his tackle yeomanly. His arrows drooped not with feathers low, and in his hands he bare a mighty bow. A nuthead had he, with a brown visage. Of woodcraft could he well all the usage. Upon his arms he bare a gay bracer, and by his side a sword and a buckler. And on that other's side a gay dagger, harnessed well, and sharp as point of spear. Christopher on his breast of silver sheen, and horn he bare, the baldric was of green. A forester was he, soothly, as I guess. There was also a nun, a prioress, that of her smiling was full simple and coy. Her greatest oath was but by Saint Loy, and she was cleped Madame Eglantine. Full well she sang the service divine, and tuned in her nose full seemly. In French she spake full fair and fetisly after the school of Stratford at Abo, for French of Paris was to her unknow. At Meta was she well y taught withal. She let no morsel from her lippes fall, nor wet her fingers in her sauce deep. Well could she carry a morsel, and well keep that no droppe ne fell upon her breast. In courtesy was set full much her lest. Her overlippe wiped she so clean, that in her cup there was no farthing seen of grease, when she drunken had her draught. Full seemly after her meat she wrought, and sickerly she was of great disport, and full pleasant and amiable of port, and pained her to counterfeit a cheer of court, and be a stately of mannere, and to behold indigny of reverence. But for to speaken of her conscience, she was so charitable and so piteous, she woulde weep if that she saw a mouse caught in a trap, if it were dead or bled. Of smalle hounds had she, that she fed with roasted flesh and milk and wastel bread. But sore she wept if one of them were dead, or if men smote it with a yarde smart. And all was conscience and tender heart. Full seemly her wimple y pinched was, her nose tretis, her eyen gray as glass, her mouth full small, and thereto soft and red, but sickerly she had a fair forehead. It was almost a span a brow, I trow, for hardily she was not undergrow. Full fetis was her cloak, as I was ware. Of small coral about her arm she bare a pair of beads, gauded all with green, and thereon hung a brooch of gold full sheen, on which first written in crown day, and after, Amor vincit omnia. Another nun also with her had she, that was her chapelaine, and priestess three. A monk there was, a fair for the mastery, an outrider that loved venery, a manly man, to be an abbot able. Full many a dainty horse had he in stable, and when he rode, men might his bridle hear jingling in a whistling wind as clear and eke as loud as doth the chapel bell, there as his lord was keeper of the cell. The rule of Saint Mare and of Saint Benet, because that was old and some deal straight, this ilke monk let olde things pace, and held after the newe world the trace. He was not of the text a pulled hen that saith that hunters be not holy men. Nay, that a monk, when he is cloisterless, is like to a fish that is waterless. This is to say, a monk out of his cloister, this ilke text held he not worth an oyster. And I say his opinion was good. Why should he study and make himself wood upon a book in cloister always poor, or swinken with his hands, and labour as Austin bid? How shall the world be served? Let Austin have his swink to him reserved. Therefore he was a prickosore aright. Greyhounds he had as swift as fowl of flight. Of pricking and of hunting for the hare was all his lust, for no cost would he spare. I saw his sleeves are filled at the hand with gris, and that the finest of the land. And for to fasten his hood under his chin, he had of gold y-wrought a curious pin. A love knot in the greater end there was. His head was bald, and shone as any glass, and eke his face, as it had been anoint. He was a lord full fat and in good point, his eyen steep and rolling in his head, that steamed as a furnace of a lead. His boots supple, his horse in great estate. Now certainly he was a fair prelate. He was not pale as a four-pined ghost. A fat swan loved he best of any roast. His palfrey was as brown as is a berry. A friar there was, a wanton and a merry, a limitour, a full solemn man. In all the orders four is none that can so much of dalliance and fair language. He had y made full many a marriage of younge women at his owen cost. Unto his order he was a noble post. Full well beloved, and familiar was he with franklins over all in his country, and eke with worthy women of the town. For he had power of confession, as said himself more than a curate, for of his order he was licentiate. Full sweetly heard he confession, and pleasant was his absolution. He was an easy man to give penance, there as he wist to have a good pittance. For unto a poor order for to give is sign that a man is well y shrive. For if he gave, he durst make avaunt, he wist that the man was repentant. For many a man so hard is of his heart, he may not weep although him sore smart. Therefore instead of weeping and prayeres, men must give silver to the poor freres. His tippet was aye farced full of knives and pins for to give to fair wives, and certainly he had a merry note. Well could he sing and playen on a rote. Of yeddings he bare utterly the prize. His neck was white as is the fleur de lis. Thereto he strong was as a champion. He knew well the taverns in every town, and every hostler and gay tapster better than a lazer or a beggara. For unto such a worthy man as he accordeth not, as by his faculty, to have with such lazers acquaintance. It is not honest, it may not advance, as for to deal with no such poor ale, but all with rich and sellers of vitale. And over all there as profit should arise. Courteous he was, and lowly of service, and as no man nowhere so virtuous. He was the best beggar in all his house, and gave a certain frame for the grant. None of his brethren came into his haunt. For though a widow had but one shoe, so pleasant was his in principio, yet he would have a farthing ere he went. His purchase was well better than his rent. And rage he could and play as any whelp in love days. There could he muchel help. For there was he not like a cloisterer, with threadbare scope, as is a poor scholar, but he was like a master or a pope. Of double worsted was his semicope, that rounded him as a bell out of press. Somewhat he lisped for his wantonness, to make his English sweet upon his tongue, and in his harping, when that he had sung, his eyen twinkled in his head aright, as do the stars in a frosty night. This worthy limitour was called Huberd. A merchant was there with a forked beard, and motley, and high on his horse he sat. Upon his head a Flandrish beaver hat. His boots clasped fair and fetisly. His reasons aye spake he full solemnly, sounding alway the increase of his winning. He would the sea were kept for anything betwixt a Middleburg and Orwell. Well could he in exchange shields sell, this worthy man full well his wit beset. There wiste no wight that he was in debt, so stately was he of governance with his bargains and with his chevasance. Forsooth he was a worthy man withal, but sooth to say I not how men him call. A clerk there was of Oxenford also, that unto logic had a long ago. As lean was his horse as is a rake, and he was not right fat, I undertake, but looked hollow, and thereto soberly. Full threadbare was his overous courtpie, for he had not gotten him yet no benefice, nay was not worldly, to have an office. For him was lever have at his bed's head 20 books, clothed in black or red, of Aristotle and his philosophy, in robes rich, or fiddle, or psaltery. But all be that he was a philosopher, yet hadde he but little gold in coffer. But all that he might of his friends hent, on books and on learning, he it spent, and busily gan for the souls pray of them that gave him wherewith to schole. Of study took he most care and heed. Not one word spake he more than was need, and that was said in form and reverence, and short and quick, and full of high sentence. Sounding in moral virtue was his speech, and gladly would he learn, and gladly teach. A sergeant of the law, wary and wise, that often had ye been at the parvis, there was also full rich of excellence. Discreet he was, and of great reverence. He seemed such, his words were so wise, justice he was full often in assize, by patent and by plain commission. For his science and for his high renown, of fees and robes had he many one. so great a purchaser was nowhere none. All was fee simple to him. In effect his purchasing might not be insuspect. Nowhere so busy a man as he there was, and yet he seemed busier than he was. In terms had he case and doom as all that from the time of King Will were fall. Thereto he could indite, and make a thing there coulde no wight pinch at his writing. In every statute could he plain by rote. He rode but homely in a medley coat, girt with a cent of silk, with barres small. Of his array tell I no longer talle. A francolin was in this company. White was his beard as is the daisy. Of his complexion he was sanguine. Well loved he in the morn a sop and wine. To liven in delight was ever his one, for he was Epicurus Owen's son. That held opinion in plain delight was verily felicity per fight. An householder, and that a great was he. Saint Julian, he was in his country. His bread, his ale, was always after one. A better envined man was nowhere none. Without bake meat never was his house. Of fish and flesh, and that so plenteous. It snowed in his house of meat and drink, of alle dainties that men coulde think. After the sundry seasons of the year, so changed he his meat and his souper. Many full fat partridge had he in mew, and many a bream, and many a lucerne stew. Woe was his cook but if his sauce were poignant and sharp, and ready all his gear. His table dormant in his hall alway stood ready covered all the longe day. At sessions there was he lord and sire. Full oftentime he was knight of the shire. An anlace and a gipsere, all of silk, hung at his girdle, white as morning milk. A sheriff had he been, and a contour was nowhere such a worthy vavasor. An haberdasher and a carpenter, a webbe, a dyer, and a tapicer were with a seek, clothed in one livery, of a solemn and great fraternity. Full fresh and new their gear y picked was. Their knives were y chipped not with brass, but all with silver wrought full clean and well. Their girdles and their pouches every deal. Well seemed each of them a fair burgess, to sitten in a guild hall on the dais. Evereach for the wisdom that he can was shapely for to be an alderman. For chattels hadde they enough and rent, and eke their wives would it well assent, and elles certain they had been to blame. It is full fair to be a clept madam, and for to go to vigils all before, and have a mantle royally bore. A cook they hadde with them for the nones, to boil the chickens and the marrow bones, and powder merchant tart and gallingal. Well could he know a draught of London ale. He could roast and stew and broil and fry, make mortrews, and well bake a pie. But great harm was it, as it thought to me, that on his shin a mormel hadde he. For blanc manger, that made he with the best. A shipman was there, one far by west, for aught I wot be was of Dartmouth. He rode upon a rounsey as he couth, all in a gown of falding to the knee. A dagger hanging by a lace had he about his neck under his arm adown. The hot summer had made his hue all brown. And certainly he was a good fellow. Full many a draught of wine had he y draw. From Bordeaux ward, while the chapmen sleep, of nice conscience took he no keep. If that he fought, and had the higher hand, by water he sent them home to every land. But of his craft to reckon well his tides, his steames and his strandes him besides, his Herbero, his moon, and laud manage, there was none such from Hull unto Carthage. Hardly he was, and wise, I undertake, with many a tempest had his beard been shake. He knew well all the havens as they were, from Scotland to the Cape of Finisterre. In every creek in Bretagne and in Spain, his barge yclept was the Magdalene. With us there was a doctor of physic, and all this world was there none him like, to speak of physic and of surgery, for he was grounded in astronomy. He kept his patient a full great deal in hours by his magic natural. Well could he fortune the ascendant of his images for his patient. He knew the cause of every malady, were it of cold or hot or moist or dry, and where engendered, and of what humour. He was a very perfect practisour, the cause and of his harm the root. Anon he gave the sick man his boot. Full ready had he his apothecaries, to send his drugs and his lecturies. For each of them made other for to win their friendship was not new to begin. Well knew he the old Asclepius, and Dioscorides, and eke Rufus, old Hippocras, Hali and Gallian, Serapion, Rhasis and Avicen, Averroes, Damascene and Constantine, Bernard and Gatisden and Gilbertin. Of his diet measurable was he, for it was of no superfluity, but of great nourishing and digestible. His study was but little on the Bible. In sanguine and in purse he glad was all, lined with taffeta and with sendal. And yet he was but easy of dispense, he kept that he won in the pestilence. For gold in physic is a cordial, therefore he loved gold in special. A good wife was there of beside Bath, but she was some deal deaf, and that was scath. Of cloth making she had in such an haunt, she passed them of Ypres and of Gaunt. In all the parish wife was there none that to the offering before her should gone, and if there did, certain so wroth was she that she was out of all a charity. Her coverchiefs were full fine of ground. I durste swear they weighed 10 pound, that on Sunday were upon her head. Her hosen were of fine scarlet red, full straight y-tied, and shoes full moist and new. Bold was her face, and fair and red of hue. She was a worthy woman all her life. Husbands at the church door had she had 5, withouten other company in youth. But thereof needeth not to speak as nooth. And thrice had she been at Jerusalem. She hadde passed many a strange stream. At Rome she had been, and at Boulogne, in Gallus and St. James, and at Cologne. She coulde much of wandering by the way. Gat-toothed was she, soothly for to say. Upon an ambler easily she sat, y wimpled well, and on her head an hat as broad as is a buckler or a targe, a foot-mantle about her hips large, and on her feet a pair of spurs sharp. In fellowship well could she laugh and carp, of remedies of love she knew perchance, for of that art she could the olde dance. A good man there was of religion, that was a poor parson of a town, but rich he was of holy thought and work. And he was also a learned man, a clerk, that Christ's gospel truly would he preach. His parishioners devoutly would he teach. Benign he was, and wonder diligent, and in adversity full patient. And such he was he proved often sithes, full loth were him to curse for his tithes, but rather would he given out of doubt unto his poor parishioners about, of his offering and eke of his substance. He would in little thing have sufficence. Wide was his parish, and houses far asunder, but he ne left naught, for no rain nor thunder, in sickness and in mischief, to visit the farthest in his parish, much and lit, upon his feet and in his hands a staff. This noble example to his sheep he gaf, that first he wrought, and afterward he taught. Out of the gospel he the word is caught. In this figure he added yet thereto, that if gold rust, what should iron do? For if a priest be foul, on whom we trust, no wonder is a lewed man to rust. And shame it is, if that a priest take keep, to see a shitten shepherd and clean sheep. Well ought a priest ensample for to give, by his own cleanness, how his sheep should live. He sette not his benefice to hire, and left his sheep encumbered in the mire, and ran unto London, unto St. Paul's, to seek him a shantery for souls, or with a brotherhood to be withhold. But dwelled at home, and kept a well his fold, so that the wolf ne made it not miscarry. He was a shepherd, and no mercenary. And though he holy were and virtuous, he was to sinful men not dispiteous, nor of his speech a dangerous nor dine, but in his teaching discreet and benign. To drawen folk to heaven with fairness, by good ensample was his business. But it were any person obstinate, whatso he were of high or low estate, him would he snibbe sharply for the nose. A better priest I trow that nowhere none is. He waited after no pomp nor reverence, nor maked him a spiced conscience. But Christ is Lord, and his apostles 12 he taught, and first he followed it himself. With him there was a ploughman, was his brother, that had he laid of dung full many a father. A true swinker and a good was he, living in peace and perfect charity. God loved he best with all his heart at alle times, were it gain or smart, and then his neighbour right as himself. He would a thresh, and there to dyke and delve, for Christ's sake, for every poor wight, withouten hire, if it lay in his might. His tithes paid he full fair and well, both of his proper swink and his chattel, and a tabard he rode upon a mare. There was also a reeve and a millera, a sompner and a pardoner also, a manciple and myself, there were no mo. The miller was a stout carle for the nones. Full big he was of brawn, and eke of bones. That proved well, for over all where he came, at wrestling he would bear away the rame. He was short-shouldered, broad, thick at gar. There was no door that he hold heave off bar, or break it at a running with his head. His beard as any sow or fox was red, and thereto broad, as though it were a spade. Upon the cop right of his nose he had a wart, and thereon stood a tuft of hairs red as the bristles of a sow's ear. His nose thurles black were and wide. A sword and buckler bare he by his side. His mouth as wide as was a furnace. He was a jangler and a golardice, and that was most sin and harlotrise. Well could he steal a corn, and toll a thrice, and yet he had a thumb of gold, pardie. A white coat and a blue hood weared he. A bagpipe well could he blow and sound, and therewithal he brought us out of town. A gentle manciple was there of a temple, of which acateurs mighte take sample, for to be wise in buying of vitail. For whether that he paid, or took by tale, algate he waited so in his acate, that he was aye before in good estate. Now is not that of God a full fair grace, that such a lewd man as which shall pace the wisdom of an heap of learned men. Of masters had he more than thrice 10, that were of law expert and curious, of which there was a dozen in that house, worthy to be stewards of rent and land of any lord that is in England, to make him live by his proper good, in honour debtless, but if he would, or live as scarcely as him list desire, and able for to help in all a shire. In any case, that might a fall or hap, and yet this manciple set their aller cap. The reeve was a slender choleric man. His beard was shaved as high as ever he can. His hair was by his ears round y shorn. His top was docked like a priest beforn, full longe were his legs, and full lean, like a staff. There was no calf y seen. Well could he keep a garner and a bin. There was no auditor could on him win. Well wist he by the drought, and by the rain, the yielding of his seed and of his grain. His lord's sheep, his neat, and his dairy, his swine, his horse, his store, and his poultry were wholly in this reeve's governing, and by his covenant gave he reckoning. Since that his lord was 20 year of age, there could no man bring him in arrearage. There was no bailiff, herd, nor other hind, that he ne knew his sleight and his covine. They were adrad of him, as of the death. His wonning was full fair upon an heath, with green trees ashadowed was his place. He could a better than his lord purchase. Full rich he was y stored privily. His lord well could he please subtilly, to give and lend him of his own good, and have a thank, and yet a coat and hood. In youth he learned, had a good mister, he was well good right, a carpenter. This reeve sat upon a right good stot, that was all palmly grey, and hight a Scot. A long surcoat of purse upon he had, and by his side he bare a rusty blade. Of Norfolk was this reeve, of which I tell, beside a town man clepen Baldeswell. Tucked he was, as is a friar about, and never rode the hinderest of the rout. A Sompner was there with us in that place, that had a fire-red cherubin's face, for sus flame he was, with eye and narrow. As hot he was, and lecherous as a sparrow, with scalled brows black, and pilled beard. Of his visage children were sore afeard. And as quicksilver, lithards, nor brimstone, borus, cerus, nor oil of tartar none, nor ointment that would cleanse or bite, that him might helpen of his welcus white, nor of the knobs sitting on his cheeks. Well loved he garlic, onions, and leeks, and for to drink strong wine as red as blood. Then would he speak, and cry as he were wood, and when he well drunken had the wine, then would he speak no word but Latin. A few terms knew he, 2 or 3, that he had learned out of some decree. No wonder is, he heard it all the day. And eke ye knowen well how that a jay can clap and wat as well as can the Pope. But whoso would another thing him grope, that he had spent all his philosophy, aye, quistio quid juris, would he cry. He was a gentle harlot, and a kind. A better fellow should a man not find. He would a suffer for a quart of wine. a good fellow to have his concubine a 12 month, and excuse him at the full privily a finch eke could he pull. And if he found where a good fellow, he would teach him to have none awe, in such a case as the archdeacon's curse. But if a man's soul were in his purse, for in his purse he should ye punished be. Purse is the archdeacon's hell, said he, but well I wot he lied right indeed. Of cursing ought each guilty man to dread, for curse will slay right as a sailing Sabbath, and also wear him of significat. In danger had he at his own guise the younge girls of the diocese, and knew their counsel, and was of their rede. A garland had he set upon his head, as great as if it were for an ale stake. A buckler had he made him of a cake. With him there rode a gentle pardoner of Ronceville, his friend and his compere, that straight was comen from the court of Rome. Full loud he sang, "Come hither, love, to me." This Sompnour bare to him a stiff burden. Was never trump of half so great a sound. This pardoner had hair as yellow as wax, but smooth it hung, as doth a strike of flax. By ounces hung his locks that he had, and therewith he his shoulders overspread. Full thin it lay by culpins one and one, but hood for jollity he weared none, for it was trussed up in his wallet. Him thought he rode all of the nuaget, dishevel, save his cap, he rode all bare. Such glaring eyen had he as in hair. A vernicle had he sewed upon his cap. His wallet lay before him in his lap. Breadful of pardon, come from Rome all hot. A voice he had as small as hath a goat. No beard had he, nor ever one should have. As smooth it was as it were new y shave. I trow he were a gelding or a mare. But of his craft from Berwick unto Ware, ne was there such another pardoner. For in his mail he had a pillow bare, which, as he said, was Our Lady's veil. He said he had a gobbet of the sail that Saint Peter had, when that he went upon the sea, till Jesus Christ him hent. He had a cross of Latin foul of stones, and in a glass he had pig's bones. But with these relics, when that he fond, a poor parson dwelling upon lond, upon a day he got him more money than the parson got in moneths tway. And thus with feigned flatterings and japes he made the parson and the people his apes. But truly to tellen at the last, he was in church a noble ecclesiast. Well could he read a lesson or a story, but alderbest he sang an offertory. For well he wiste, when that song was sung, he muste preach, and well affile his tongue, to win silver as he right well could. Therefore he sang full merrily and loud. Now have I told you shortly in a clause the estate, the array, the number, and eke the cause why that assembled was this company in Southwark at this gentle hostelry, that highte the tabard fast by the bell. But now is time for you to tell how that we bare in us that ilke night, when we were in that hostelry aright, and after will I tell of our voyage, and all the remnant of our pilgrimage. But first I pray you of your courtesy, that ye arret it not my villainy, though that I plainly speak in this matter, to tellen you their words and their cheer. Not though I speak their words properly. For this ye know, and also well as I, whoso shall tell a tale after a man, he must rehearse as nigh as ever he can, every word if it be in his charge. I'll speak he ne'er so rudely and so large. Or else he must tell his tale untrue, or feign things, or find words new. He may not spare although he were his brother, he must as well say one word as another. Christ spake himself full broad in holy writ, and well ye wot no villainy is it. Eke Plato saith, whoso that can him read, the words must be cousin to the deed. Also I pray you to forgive it me, as have I not set folk in their degree. Here in this tale, as that they shoulden stand, my wit is short, ye may well understand. Great cheer made our host us every one, and to the supper set he us anon, and served us with victual of the best. Strong was the wine, and well to drink us lest. A seemly man our host was withal, for to have been a marshal in an hall. A large man he was with eye and steep, a fairer burgess is there none and cheap. Bold of his speech, and wise and well he taught, and of manhood lacked him right naught. Eke thereto he was right a merry man, and after supper playin he began, and spake of mirth amongs other things. When that we had made our reckonings, and said thus, "Now, lordings, truly ye be to me welcome right heartily, for by my troth, if that I shall not lie, I saw not this year such a company at once in this herborough, now. Fain would I do you mirth, and I wist how. And of a mirth I am right now bethought, to do you ease, and it shall cost naught. Ye go to Canterbury, God you speed, the blissful martyr quite you your meed. And well I wot, as ye go by the way, ye shapen you to talken and to play. For truly comfort nor mirth is none, to ride by the way as dumb as stone. And therefore would I make you disport, as I said erst, and do you some comfort. And if you liketh all by one assent, now for to standen at my judgment, and for to worken as I shall you say tomorrow, when ye riden on the way, now by my father's soul that is dead, but ye be merry, smiteth off mine head. Hold up your hands without more speech. Our counsel was not long afore to seech. Us thought it was not worth to make it wise, and granted him without more avise, and bade him say his verdict as him lest. Lordings, quoth he, now hearken for the best, but take it not, I pray you, in disdain. This is the point, to speak it platt and plain, that each of you, to shorten with your way in this voyage, shall tell in tales tway, to Canterbury ward, I mean it so, and homeward he shall tell in other two, of adventures that whilom have befall, and which you that beareth him best of all, that is to say, that telleth in this case tales of best sentence and most solace, shall have a supper at your aller cost, here in this place, sitting by this post, when that ye come again from Canterbury. And for to make you the more merry, I will myself gladly with you ride, right at mine own cost, and be your guide. And whoso will my judgment with say, shall pay for all we spenden by the way. And if ye vouchsafe that it be so, tell me anon without words mo, and I will early shape me therefore. This thing was granted, and our oath we swore with full glad heart, and prayed him also that he would vouchsafe for to do so, and that he would be our governor, and of our tales judge and repertoire, and set a supper at a certain price, and we will ruled be at his device, in high and low, and thus by one assent we be accorded to his judgment. And thereupon the wine was fetten on, we drunken, and to rest went each one, without any longer tarrying. A-morrow, when the day began to spring, uprose our host, and was our allercock, and gathered us together in a flock, and forth we rid in all a little space, unto the watering of St. Thomas. And there our host began his horse arrest, and said, Lords, hearken if you lest, to weet your forward, and I it record, if evensong and morning song accord. Let's see now who shall tell the first tale. As ever may I drink a wine or ale, whoso is rebel to my judgment shall pay for all that by the way is spent. Now draw ye cuts, ere that ye farther twin, he which that hath the shortest shall begin. Sir Knight, quoth he, my master and my lord, now draw the cut, for that is mine accord. Come near, quoth he, my lady prioress, and ye, Sir Clerk, let be your shamefastness, nor study naught, lay hand to every man. Anon to draw, and every wight began, and shortly for to tellen as it was, were it by a venture, or sort, or cost, the sooth is this, the cut fell to the knight, of which full blithe and glad was every wight, and tell he must his tale as was reason, by foreword and by composition, as ye have heard. What needeth words mo? And when this good man saw that it was so, as he that wise was and obedient to keep his forward by his free assent, he said, Sithen, I shall begin this game. Why, welcome be the cut in God's name. Now let us ride, and hearken what I say. And with that word we ridden forth our way, and he began with right merry cheer his tale anon, and said, as you shall hear. End of the general prologue.